Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this inDialogue event. I'm Cecily Cook. I am the Director of Grantee and Alumni Relations at the Asian Cultural Council. The Asian Cultural Council has the mission of advancing international dialogue, respect, and understanding through the exchange of artists and arts professionals in Asia and the United States. I'm very pleased to introduce Tsai Pao-Chang, the moderator of today's event. And today's event was organized by the Asian Cultural Council's Taipei office. Pao received fellowships from ACC in 2011 and 2018, and these fellowships supported his research and study of musical theater techniques and pedagogy in the United States and Korea. He's one of the most energetic and ambitiously international artists that I know, and I'm very pleased to see him this morning for me, and looking forward to the conversation that we'll have today. Pao, take it away.
Thank you, Cecily. Hi, everyone. My name is Pao. I am a theater playwright, director, and performer from Taiwan. Thanks again to ACC for inviting me to host this forum. I think today we will have a very interesting conversation. So before we dive into the real discussion, please allow me to introduce to three wonderful artists that I have this privilege to work with. So first off, I would like to introduce Michael. Please say something.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Leibenluft. My Chinese name is Li Mai. I'm a theater and film director based in Brooklyn, in New York, and I'm the artistic director of Gung Ho Projects.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael, for being with us. And I would like to introduce the next member of our panelist, Jeremy. Is Jeremy there?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Tiang. I'm a writer and translator from Chinese, originally from Singapore and currently based in New York.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy, for being with us. And last but not least, let's welcome bilingual, wonderful, beautiful actress Wei-Yi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wei-Yi Lin, and I am a bilingual actress. I've lived in New York for over 11 years, but right now I'm in Taipei.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wei-Yi. And I know it's a little bit late for those who are in Taiwan. It is super early for those who are in New York, not to mention California. So thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate that. So due to the limited time that we have, let's directly jump into our discussion today. Well, first of all, we all know it's impossible to talk about translation within an hour. Having said that, we're still very curious. So the first question is for Jeremy. We are wondering, could you share a little bit about how to develop the craftsmanship as a professional translator between Chinese and English?
Thanks, Pao. I mean, as with most branches of the arts, the best way to develop your craft is to practice it. And I'm lucky enough to write and translate full-time. I make most of my living from translating novels, but I translate plays as well when I can. And through constant practice and forming a community and thinking a lot about my practice in an interrogative way, I'm always refining what I do and trying to get, I guess, to get better at it, to develop it.
Great. So, Jeremy 说呢，他其实 身为怎么样，我刚刚问他说要怎么样才能够培养一个专业翻译家的技艺，然后他说其实就跟大部分的事情一样，你是需要大量的练习。然后他很幸运的是一个全职在做翻译的一个翻译家，那他其实大部分都在翻译小说，那他也偶尔会翻译剧本这样子。So, would you talk a little bit about? I know you have translated several plays from the Taiwanese playwright and some Chinese playwrights, if I understood. So I'm curious about a very specific one that you have done with a Taiwanese playwright, Wei-Yu Jia, one of her plays called 现世预言. Could you talk a little bit about this process, your creative or translating process on this specific play?
Sure, that's a really good case study to choose because it's a play that I kind of shepherded from the very beginning. In that now and then I get a commission from a theatre company to translate a play, but those are few and far between because in the English-speaking world, there's not nearly enough theatre translation. And even less if you take away things like Chekhov and Ibsen, and almost none from Chinese. So I have to go out and find my own projects. With 现世预言, Wei-Yu Jia won the Taiwanese Literature Award for that play in 2014. And luckily for me, the award puts all the winning entries as PDFs on their website in full. So I was able to read the script just by downloading it. And I was kind of going through all the scripts on the website. And in 2017, I made contact with her and said, your play is amazing. May I translate it? So 现世预言, which in English we called A Fable for Now, is a play about various characters, both human and animals, who experience various apocalypses. And around them, the world ends over and over because of war, because of climate change, because of government malfeasance. Really an extremely appropriate play for our times. So after some conversation, Yu Jia was happy to allow me to translate it. I think we had a question about how to secure copyright of plays, and the answer is you don't. As a translator, you just have to check that the rights are available and that the playwright is willing, and the theatre company will be in charge of securing those rights when the time comes. But I did have an open dialogue with Yu Jia about my translation to the extent that was possible because she doesn't really speak English. But she was happy to give me a lot of freedom in the translation. And she said when it was done in Taipei, the director had changed a lot of things and I was free to change a lot of things. So she's a very generous playwright and regards her work as just creating a blueprint that other creative individuals, including translators, then take off from, which is great because I regard translation as a collaborative process in which the translator has an equal creative role. And so I translated the play and sent it around to various venues. In the fall of 2017, it was chosen for a staged reading at the Penworld Voices Festival in New York, which Wei-Yi was part of. And in the spring of 2018, it was given another staged reading at the Typhoon Festival in London. So both of these were directed by May Ann Teo. And it was really interesting in the developmental process of this translation, working with these two different groups of actors. Brian, could we have the slides, please? So here we see the New York reading. There's Wei-Yi. It's not obvious the costuming, but she's playing a duck. And in the scene, they're being thrown about by climate change. That's Ching Valdez playing a chicken. I think you're getting a sense of what kind of play it was. And you're sort of seeing how this wasn't a static presentation despite being a reading, but we got it up on its feet and moved it around to try and give an idea of what the staging might look like. I love this scene. It's two soldiers fighting on different sides of the war, then they discover that they are brothers. Next, we have the London reading. And as you can see, despite having the same director, the way it looks and the way it moved was very different because we wanted to try different things with it. May Ann's also very collaborative. She drew from the performers. There is a different actor playing the duck. As you can see, we put rubber gloves on her feet. And that was a different choice. But the yellow color of the duck was one of the key characteristics. So that kind of came across. So even though there wasn't much we could do, and there are the two brothers fighting, again, a very different look. So because we were able to do some staging, we were able to discover different things about the script, what worked, what didn't, what could be moved around. Yijia was able to come over for the New York reading, and it was a joy to have her in the room. She didn't really speak. Oh, Cecily's reminding us that May Ann Teo is also an ACC alumnus. I'm honestly glad that ACC, they have done so much good. So yeah, also working with British and American actors enabled us to use different types of slang to play with different types of phrasing. So we were able to do a lot of things with the script. It really came on a lot through working with the director and actors, which was joyous. And it's a great part of the translation process to be collaborative in that way and to develop the translation, not me alone in my room with a laptop, but working with a room full of other individuals who bring their own artistry to it. Since then, there have been a few other opportunities. A university in the UK is showcasing part of the script as their teaching materials. An acting edition is being brought out by Laertes Editions in the US. And I'm continuing to send it out. But unfortunately, as we know, theatre has somewhat ground to a standstill. But I'm hoping when it starts up again, there will still be an appetite for an apocalyptic play. Frankly, I think, we're not quite out of the woods yet. So that's not quite the complete process of my translation of 现实语言 by Wei-Yi Lin. I say not complete because it hasn't yet come to full production, but I have faith that we will get there.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. So please allow me to briefly just translate a little bit about what you just said. 所以其实在这个英语的世界里面要把英文翻成中文本来就已经大概就是像契诃夫啦或是莎士比亚会比较多的机会，事实上很难有中文原作的翻译的作品的翻译成英文。那很幸运的是在2014年魏瑜伽这个作品得到台湾文学奖，所以呢台湾文学奖就是很慷慨的把这两作品都放到网络上面。那 Jeremy 他就有机会上网看到这个作品，然后他很喜欢，所以他就翻译了。那很多人会好奇问说，这个翻译需不需要版权的问题？基本上在翻译的过程当中呢，是不需要担心版权的问题，你只要经过跟那个原作家的同意，你就可以开始着手。这个版权的问题呢，是后来剧团要上演的时候呢，他才去烦恼了就可以了。那他分享到说，这个翻译的过程当中，绝对不是一个翻译家坐在房间里面自己闷头翻译，其实很重要的事情是要跟这个整个房间里面的演员啦跟导演啦一起合作出来的过程。那这个作品呢，在2017年跟2018年呢，分别在纽约跟伦敦都有进行这个读剧的演出。那唯一呢是其中在纽约的读剧的演员。然后这个作品对于这个 Jeremy 来说很有趣的是，其实在纽约或者在伦敦其实都有不同的语言的俚语的使用的方式，所以其实要随着不断的排练跟演员跟导演讨论了，才能够慢慢发展出来适合两个不同地方的国情跟使用的语言的方式来进行翻译。Okay, so let's invite Wei-Yi into our conversation. So since Wei-Yi is in part of the New York reading, so could you share a little bit about your experience in this A Fable for Now production?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Pao. It's interesting to hear Jeremy sharing his experience on translating the play because, me as an actor, when I was doing the play, I didn't know better because it was a reading workshop. We had 5 days to put everything up. So it was like fast and dirty. So I didn't really have the time to go back to the original Chinese translation to compare the plays. And but because we're doing this panel, so I went back and trying to refresh my memory and read both versions of the play again and realized it's fascinating because it's quite different, not in the bad way, but I love that being a translator, Jeremy being a translator is not just a literal translator. He's making a lot of artistic choices when it comes to wording or, even shaping the characters. Like, for example, there's one line I find really, really different. So I like to share with everyone. Because like Jeremy said, I played Duck and Soldier A. And in one scene when Duck was talking to his friend Panda, and he's spitting some food out of his mouth and saying the following line, and I'm gonna say Chinese first, and if there's any Chinese speaker, I'm sorry. So the duck is saying, 跨三小，想打报告学着点，谁要吃这个婴儿食物啊？喷！ Okay, that's Chinese. And in English, the duck just said, disgusting. I'm not a baby, period. So those are, one is in Chinese and one is English. And when I was doing the play, the duck actually seemed like a very no filter, quick mouthed, has abandonment mommy issue, funny character. But in the Chinese version, this duck is a little bit vulgar, almost grotesque and rude. So I think for me as an actor, I would approach this role totally different if I had the privilege to play in both languages. So I think I can throw the question to Jeremy right now is like, how do you as a translator make a decision or compromise or decide like what to keep and what to let go?
Before Jeremy answer, please allow me to just do a quick translation.
Oh, of course. Yes, sorry.
So 其实唯一在纽约演这个排练读剧的时候，因为时间很短，所以他没有机会仔细的好好去研读原来原著的作品。那因为这次的这个论坛，所以他读了，他发现竟然差的非常的多。然后他刚举了一个例子，所以那个会讲中文的观众朋友大概也就有听到他刚刚讲念中文那段台词，可那段中文呢翻成英文，如果我们直译成中文的话呢，就是好恶心哦，我又不是小孩哦 ，disgusting, I'm not a baby。那其实这个东西，如果你是双语的人，你就会发现，好像差蛮多的耶，怎么会这样？那以唯一的角度来说呢，他觉得这个英语的人格跟中文的人格好像是两个不一样的人，一个是很有趣、直接、好笑的，另外一个好像激进粗鄙的状态。所以他觉得，如果是用两个不同的语言的话呢，他就会用不同的方式去演绎。所以他刚刚就问了问题了，就问 Jeremy 说，奇怪，身为这个翻译家到底是怎么样决定在翻译的过程当中去无存菁啦，或是做艺术上面的选择，到底是怎么处理的 ？So that's throw the question back to Jeremy.
So translation is in many ways a process of evolution. My first pass of a translation always sticks very close to the original, and then I sort of gradually deviate from it. So the very first draft I did was more or less what Wei-Yi had written. And I'm lucky enough to live in New York and know a lot of actors. So we did an informal reading of it by just finding a space, getting some friends in to sit around a table. Back when such things were possible, usually I pay them in food, cake, and just hear it. And that really helps me move it on. And what quickly emerged from this is that probably because Chinese is a more compact language, and also because the Taiwan Literature Award is given to an unperformed play. So that play hadn't actually been through a development process at that point. Mm-hmm. The script was way too wordy in English, which isn't a comment on the original, but it was just a lot of words. So it had to be cut down quite drastically in order to be performable. And as I did that, the characters started to take on their own lives for me. When we first meet the duck and the panda, they're in strollers in a zoo. And that kind of encouraged me to lean into the infantilization of them, to be like, okay, so what if these two animals are treated as children, but they're not children, but then they get babied and sometimes they find themselves behaving like that. And although I do refer back to the original constantly, at a certain point, you kind of have to go, this is a text that's going to work in English and has to stand on its own terms. And I think this is what works best for the characters in English and what works best for the kind of performance that we might want to do. That might shift again if we get into a full production, if we have a workshop process. So the script as it currently stands isn't the final version yet, but that's kind of a snapshot of one moment in time and my particular interpretation then.
Beautiful. I just to add on what you just said, would you be able to talk a little bit about how is it even? I don't even know if this question is relevant, but is it even possible to keep what we call the authenticity during the process of translation? How would you perceive that?
Honestly, I think authenticity is a mirage. Like any text, it's going to have multiple interpretations. You could show the Chinese script to 50 different people and they would have 50 different interpretations of it. So there isn't some kind of original essence that I have to capture, right? It's more about when I read it in Chinese, I have my interpretation and I try to bring that interpretation into English, which is why we say translation is a creative act. Different translators produce completely different versions because they're bringing their own artistry and their own interpretation to the work. Authenticity, I think, exists to the extent that maybe you might want to think about how much you want to domesticate the text, which in my case, I try not to. Like if someone's eating jianbing, then I will call it jianbing. It's not like pizza or something. So things like that. Certain terms might be unfamiliar. Certain customs might not be known to the English-speaking audience, but you try to bring them across in such a way that they are legible. And you try to bring the characteristics over rather than just turning them into American characters. It should still feel like a Taiwanese play, but not in a way that's exotic or distant.
Thank you, Jeremy. So 其实刚才我们在聊说到底在翻译的过程当中到底怎么样能够保有如果有机会有可能的话所谓的真实跟本质这样。那 Jeremy 他稍早分享的是说其实在纽约他们第一次呢是他就是刚照翻魏瑜伽那个作品翻完之后请纽约的演员一起来读剧，然后读完之后呢严格上来讲就是真的话太多了，翻成英文的话呢就是字太多了。那其实美国观众理解的幽默感跟智慧的逻辑跟中文说话的跟用中文母语的人是差非常多的，所以其实在翻译的过程当中他就必须要去无存菁，他必须要去做选择，而不能够就是照翻过来然后其实感觉很啰嗦，然后其实反而不同文化的人呢是接受不到的。那他也再次强调了翻译其实是一个创作的过程，每一个翻译家都有他自己的诠释的角度对于文本，他认为一个中文的剧本交给40个翻译家，40个翻译家对于同样的中文同样这种语言的解读跟理解也会完全的不一样，所以其实讨论本质这件事情它是有很大的弹性空间可以去讨论的这样。Okay, so thank you so much for Wei-Yi and Jeremy. So that's shift the focus to Michael, if I may. So Michael, as a director, you have been working on so many cross-cultural plays, and I know that's one of your biggest passion as well, which I admire a lot. So could you also tell us, is there a specific, have you ever formed a specific method or way when you direct a cross-cultural plays or reading like that?
Yeah, it's always different. Each project is specific in its own way, and I think I a few years ago, I forget where, but someone mentioned to me this idea of sort of a triangle of engagement, and I actually have a visual for this. So Brian, can we show that slide? So this is pretty simple, but I find it as a really helpful framework actually for any project. And I think as a director, a lot of my work is thinking about the relationship between everyone involved in the project, in the performance, in whatever we're making. And that includes the audience as well. And so I like this graphic because we have three parts to it, right? We have the creator, and I include everyone artistically who's involved in making whatever it is. So that involves the translator, of course, the playwright, designers. Then we have the thing that we're making on the other end of the triangle. And then on the third corner, we have our audience. And I was just kind of thinking a little bit more on this image, and I think you can almost imagine like all of these people, if you put them in a circle, if you play that game where everyone has to like hold hands, but like run around a field or something, there's going to be tensions where some people on some end of the triangle or one aspect of what you're doing is stretching farther, and each side of this triangle can change. So sometimes your audience may be really far in their experience, culturally, linguistically, from what you're making, but your creators may feel very close. That happens when you tour a production abroad, right? If it's something that you've created and you take to another place. So I'm always kind of thinking of this three-part relationship, and it impacts the way that I approach my work as a director and how I envision whatever we're making on stage. I think that I'm not saying that we always want to make this triangle small. Sometimes I think it's good to see something on stage that feels very distant from your experience, that almost feels close to not quite being legible or legible in the ways that feel familiar. But I think it's something that we always need to consider. And what begins on the page and continues in rehearsal with Jeremy or with other translators carries through to other decisions that we make about design, about the costuming, about what's happening in terms of the set design, and then also in terms of even how the actors are moving. That all contains culture, that all contains context, and we can use that as tools to sort of titrate or control the legibility for the audience.
Great, thank you, Michael. 所以其实 Michael 在创作的过程当中呢，我们在画面上看到那个三角形，那其实在每一个创作里面，当然每一个计划都不一样啊。那当然这个三个创作者创作本身跟观众三者之间的关系，怎么样在每一次不同的创作，针对不同的状况跟导演的选择，然后达到有趣的平衡，那这是身为导演一个很大的挑战。那当然创作者本身他可以自己选择这个作品。那 Michael 刚刚也指出一个蛮有趣的，就是说他觉得有时候作品呢离观众的距离感远一点，不见得是一件坏事。有的时候观众如果看一个自己不是那么熟悉的东西，其实也是一个有趣的观影的经验。那这些东西都是取决于导演在跟他的创作团队在工作的时候，创作团队当然包括跟设计师啊，包括跟翻译家啦等等，在讨论的时候呢，很多因素都会取决于最后这个三角形的平衡到底是什么样子。So Michael, last year, was it last year? Yeah, it feels like longer. But last year we worked on a project together. It was Taiwanese. I invited like 3 Taiwanese playwrights to create a play dedicated to the same-sex marriage, just newly passed law in Taiwan. And we have this honor to have Jeremy to translate and have you as a director for the reading in New York. So could you tell us a little bit about that working experience?
Sure. So we did 3 short plays as stage readings. And one of them was called Why Don't We Get Married? It was by Liu Jianguo, who is a phenomenal Taiwanese opera director and performer and writer. And so the piece actually had a couple of different theatrical forms in them. One was Guzaixi, or Taiwanese opera. And so we had to figure out very quickly was how to help the audience, so this is that side of the triangle, audience who may not be familiar with Taiwanese opera, be able to kind of get a sense of that form, even when we were performing in English. And so what we ended up doing was having, Jianguo was generous enough to be willing to be on stage with our performers. And so we kind of overlapped the English version with the original version so that the audience could experience both together. So let's show a quick clip of that to give people a sense of what it was like.
The sun is high and hot. The fall cicadas cry out.
Great, beautiful. Michael, please, do you have anything to add on?
That's a really short example, but I think it gives a sense of I'm really interested in this idea of, when possible, of layering and allowing the audience to kind of both experience some of the connections and synergy between the two versions, but also see the gap and allow them to kind of fill it in. Because I think sometimes, a little bit of what we're doing on stage is a little bit like a striptease, maybe. We show some things, but don't show other things, and actually activate the audience's imagination. And that can make for a more engaging theatrical experience. And the actual full video of those readings of all three plays is available online through HowlRound, and we're also going to drop the link in the chat. Yeah.
Sounds great. 所以其实刚刚我们看到影片那个例子呢，就是去年呢，我们办了一个活动，就是请了3位台湾的剧作家，为了台湾同婚元年来创作的剧本，然后在纽约进行读剧，是 Jeremy 翻译，Michael 来指导这样子。那刚才我们看到的影片呢，就是有其中一位剧作家刘建国，他写了一个剧本叫做 Why Don't We Get Married？ 那这也是蛮挑战的，因为里面用了大量的台湾的歌仔戏。那到底要怎么样让美国的观众能够理解我们歌仔戏的美呢？翻译成英文好像也不对，这是蛮尴尬的，因为其实大部分美国的观众跟这个歌仔戏的距离是很远的。如果以刚才那个三角形的图来说的话，所以 Michael 他使用的方法呢，就是他让读剧的那个美国的演员跟建国2个人呢，就是重叠的声线，让建国非常慷慨的上台演出唱一段，然后让美国的观众听到，然后也同时听到原作的歌仔戏，然后也听到英文的翻译。那 Michael 刚刚讲的一件事情很重要，就是他觉得有时候在舞台上面做呈现呢，有点像是在跳脱衣舞，就是你要有点挑逗，你要丢一点东西，可是又要给你看又给你不看，这种东西呢，让观众可以产生他自己的想象力，然后反而这个东西是完成在观众的想象力里面，其实搞不好会更有趣。Great. So, Michael, I know you once worked on a fully performed, I forgot how to say that. You once did production with indigenous people in Sichuan, is that the right way to say that, with Nuozu or Yizu, with other American actors? Could you also share that experience that you had in China?
Sure. So my theater company worked on a project, is still working on a project actually, that's a collaboration between artists in the US and also in Sichuan. And we're basically creating a folk musical that's bilingual. And it's set in Liangshan in Sichuan and centers around Yizu characters there. And then 3 characters in the Appalachian region of the US. So these are very distinct regions, but regions with a long history of division along familial or ethnic lines. And so that kind of became the centerpiece for that story. Even figuring out what the triangle was and the connection between how we as a group of collaborators could find a shared point of exploration took several years. So that's an example where figuring out even where to begin took a really long time, and I don't want to underestimate that, because I think that's very true in cross-cultural collaboration. But I'm going to show another piece, a short song from that show that also uses music and shows this overlap, I think, even in a more complex way, but I think in a way that excites me and one that I want to continue exploring in cross-cultural collaboration. This is a moment in the piece where the son in the American narrative, which is set in Kentucky, has come back and learned that his mother died while he was at war. So he's mourning for her. He's grieving for her. And at the same time, the female protagonist in the story set in Sichuan has been sent off to marry someone she doesn't love. So she's actually singing a traditional mourning song that Nuosu brides sing on the morning of their marriage when they're being essentially disowned by their family and going to move to their husband's family. So we integrated these 2 songs. It's a Nuosu folk song and a gospel song that overlap and become together. And so the 2 narratives in the piece that run in parallel kind of intersect at this moment. That's what we're going to show. So to get to that moment, it took 2 playwrights, 3 composers, and me a couple years and a lot of mapping out things together to find like how do those characters land in that emotional moment together. And then we added all the performers, and literally people were singing out loud, and we were finding the right key for those songs to overlap. So it was a literal example of kind of finding that meeting point together.
That was breathtaking. Every time I watch it, I got goosebumps. So 所以刚才我们单看到那个影片呢，是 Michael 曾经在四川指导的一个作品。那刚才看到那个片段呢，其实很明显就是2个不同的文化，一个就是在美国的肯塔基有一个士兵，他回到家里发现母亲已经过世了，所以他呢唱了一首悼念母亲的歌曲。那另外一边呢是四川的彝族也叫傩族。那也是一个女孩子，她要出嫁，她要嫁给一个她不爱的男人的时候呢，唱了一个出嫁歌。Am I right, Michael? 出嫁歌 Is that how you say that?
I think it's 哭嫁歌。
哭嫁歌。所以呢，他们花了很长的时间。大家可以看到，刚刚那2个看起来几乎是天衣无缝的组合，其实花了他们很长的时间在找到底唱歌唱到哪里的时候，同一个 key 呢要对在一起啦，呼吸要怎么样对照，然后才能够把这2个平行时空发生的事情这么完美的对在一起。然后他们就是会持续的继续工作，朝这个方向去努力。Okay.This is very beautiful. Thank you so much. Before we jump into our Q&A session, which means those who are online right now, feel free to send in your questions, and we're hoping that we can answer them as much as possible. Before we are collecting, please send in the questions right now. And while we're collecting the questions, could any of you share a little bit about the latest production, as far as I know, that 3 of you worked on? Is called Salesman 之死. It's like a mixed title of Mandarin and English. Can anyone share a little bit about that? I found that project extremely interesting.
You want to take it, Jeremy? You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just do a quick synopsis of what this is. In 1983, Arthur Miller went to Beijing to direct the first Chinese production of Death of a Salesman, 推销员之死, which he did despite not having directed before and also not speaking Chinese. The production was a great success at Beijing Renyi, the Beijing People's Art Theatre, in great part due to the translator, Ying Ruocheng, who also played Willy Loman, and essentially made the whole thing come about. It was a great instance of cross-cultural collaboration, and something that we thought would be interesting to explore through a theatrical exploration of that production. So we used Ying Ruocheng's original text. We used stories from both their memoirs, Ying Ruocheng and Arthur Miller, and also those members of the cast who were still alive, whom we could interview. And Shen Huihui, the rehearsal interpreter, was generous enough to give us a lot of insight into the rehearsal process. And Wei-Yi was playing Shen Huihui in our production. Unfortunately, thanks to COVID, the production remains in our minds and wasn't actually able to make it to the stage, but we live in hope of presenting it in the new changed world after this.
Thank you, Jeremy. 所以其实这个叫做Salesman 之死的这个制作呢，其实是可以追溯到1983年啊，有一个很有名的美国的剧本叫做《推销员之死》，那作者叫做亚瑟·米勒，他在1983年的时候曾经到北京跟北京的人艺合作了这个作品。那其实这个作品，据我所知啊，据我跟大家的聊天的理解到说，其实这是非常有趣的，因为亚瑟·米勒他根本不会讲中文，然后他那个时候也不了解中国的文化，可是其实中国那个时候才刚文革结束。所以其实不止语言是一个翻译这个问题，连很多概念上的东西在中国那个时候都不存在。例如说推销员、保险这件事情，对他们来说是一个完全不能够理解的概念。所以其实 这个计划呢，在那个时候其实是很成功的，因为它是一个非常经典的中西文化交流的一个制作。那 Jeremy 他们呢，很幸运的，可从这个殷若成的原著，还有阅读了双方的回忆录啦，然后还有机会的当初呢，现在还活着的演员也接受了访问这样子。然后唯一在这个制作里面呢，就是担任当年的那个翻译家。那因为新冠的关系，很可惜的这个制作没办法继续演，但是他们非常希望等到疫情结束之后呢，能够继续把这个作品搬上舞台，我相信是非常非常精彩的。Anything you guys would like to add on, Michael or Wei-Yi, to share with us?
Just a quick shout out to ACC in the meantime, who made the grant that enabled Arthur Miller to go to Beijing in the first place.
Exactly.
Yay.
That's amazing. We just found out that today as well. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like the process of collaboration in many of these instances is almost as powerful and impactful, perhaps, as the presentation of the project for the audience itself. And so I think we're obviously so obsessed with this type of work that we decided to make a play about essentially translation and cultural exchange in and of itself. And I think that we're excited to hopefully one day kind of use that performance in and of itself to open up a lot of these questions and engage in them with an audience in New York and elsewhere. So we hope that people who are here can join for that, and we can continue the conversation.
Exactly.
And it was fun, and it was so layered. Albeit short rehearsal period, we were doing exactly the same thing that the characters are doing in the play, that they're talking about like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. How can they get a loan? Why can they live in a house without fully pay the entire thing? Like they're discussing and like, what is a salesman? What does that even mean? And we, the real actors in New York, we talk about like, well, when they're hungry, what they're craving won't be a flour cake, it will be a pork bun. I remember that took us 20 minutes to argue with Jeremy, and Michael's like, no, it's 包子. We would never say 烧饼. It doesn't sound right. Or it's like, I don't think we will speak like that in Chinese. Can we change a phrase? Can we make it a little bit more Beijing-like, not as Taiwanese-like or Singaporean-like? I think doing the play, rehearsing the play in and of itself is a realization of the play. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I should have said that the play takes place in both Chinese and English, and every single person in our rehearsal room was bilingual, except the actor playing Arthur Miller, which seemed appropriate in all kinds of ways.
And it's all women, by the way. It's all women show.
If any of you are interested for further information, we will send the link so people can read more about that and also see the main image of the show. Oh yes, this one. It's all women cast. Beautiful.
When we did the photo shoot, but she should be in this photo.
Yeah, I was in Taiwan, so I wasn't in the photo.
Great. So we can't wait to see the performance. This sounds like a brilliant and wonderful idea in terms of this cross-cultural collaboration. So we got one question comes in. So let me share that with you guys. So which do you prefer? A running subtitle translation or an intermittent spoken bilingual interfacing? What is the biggest challenge when you try to translate between cultures? How do you deal with the challenge? Any idea?
I'll take the first part quickly. I think that usually I try to never interrupt the rhythm of whatever's going on. So unlike what we've done in this panel, in a theatrical performance, I would usually use some type of titling on stage. And But that's always been a challenge and one that I still am trying to work on, and how to integrate that titling organically into the storytelling. So what I try to avoid having subtitles way up here or way down here, and then distracting the audience so they feel like they have to look at the text and then it's what's on. I'm still trying to explore ways with designers of really integrating that visual subtitling text, if we need it, into the action, or even in some moments not having subtitling and letting physical language, intonation, all the things that are beyond language communicate an idea, which I think is totally a valid choice.
Mm-hmm. 所以观众是问说，到底在舞台上面是用字幕好呢，还是说干脆就是用双语的方式，这样交叉的进行，让观众理解？那 Michael 是觉得说，平常在剧场上的演出哈，他尽量会避免这种讲完英文又讲中文这种可能会影响戏剧节奏的事情。那他其实也很谨慎在使用这个字幕这件事情，因为在舞台上面字幕也很容易会干扰到观众，有时候要摆高啊还是摆低啊，然后会不会影响到戏剧的进行？所以他其实会把这个东西呢，把它放到跟舞台设计讨论的一个范畴里面。当然，他也觉得不一定要用 subtitle， 不一定要有字幕，因为有时候你可以透过语言，你可以透过你的声情，你可以透过你的音调，透过你的动作，也是可以让观众理解这些事情的。这样子。Anyone like to answer the second question? Jeremy or Wei-Yi? Like, what's the biggest challenge when you try to translate between cultures? How do you deal with the challenge?
I guess I would say that translation is always between cultures, because language is so deeply intertwined with culture. It's never just a question of language. Even working within Singapore, even translating a Singaporean play from Chinese to English, because both languages are spoken in Singapore, that's still a cultural shift, because the different language communities have different cultural norms, different ways of thinking, lots of differences that need to be brought across. And really, it's always a sense of bringing as much as you can, particularly for theatre, because you can't footnote it. It has to be perceived in the moment, of just creating as much of the context that you can so the audience can apprehend what you're trying to bring across. And just use as many verbal cues and to collaborate with the director and the actors to convey that through the staging, because a lot of things can be brought across other than through words. But yeah, you lose some things, you gain some things, and that's translation.
所以其实在翻译的过程当中啊，即便啊像在新加坡，他们是中英文都是官方，就是都是普遍使用的语言，即便在新加坡这样子对翻啊，都还是会要注意到很多很多不同的眉角，因为其实即便在中文的世界里面，就有太多不同的文化语言的理解、使用的用法，所以其实在翻译绝对不是只是翻译语言本身，是翻译整个文化。那基本上在舞台演出的时候啊，其实也是可以透过其他舞台上面的元素来协助观众理解，最重要的还是要让观众理解到这个戏到底在讲什么。那其实如果在舞台上面演出的话呢，就可以仰赖其他的因素。那 Jeremy 也说，其实在翻译的过程当中，你本来就会失去一些东西，但是你也会得到一些新的东西，就是像一个来来复复的过程。Anything you like to share, Wei-Yi?
Yes, I think for the first question, you know, in Taiwan, we have the subtitle culture, so it's easy for the audience to read the subtitles. Also, I don't think we will have much problem if we were to do that here. But in New York or in America, when it comes to Chinese dialogue or something, I did a lot of different clever ways to have it covered so we don't have to put on the subtitle. For example, you can have another person on the side who doesn't speak Chinese, so I can be on the phone with my mom and she can say, 你赶快回家啦。她说什么意思你要我回家？ What does she mean? She wants me to go home. So I can do both languages to different people and fulfill the audience, whoever, you know, speaks whatever language. So I think I really enjoyed that kind of resolution. And for the second question, I like, you know, what Jeremy said. You know, as an actor, luckily I don't have to worry about translation so much because brilliant people like Jeremy will do that work for me. I think for an actor is to interpreting rhythm. and that's one of the most challenging thing for me is the two languages have two different rhythms. And can I achieve the same effect at the same cues and same sense of humor or same deep understanding of whatever is happening right now? I think that's the translating part I should do as an actor. And I'm still trying to figure out.
Can I follow up with that with a question? Because Emma also asked a question which was about what are the particular delights of Mandarin and English translation? And I'm thinking a lot about rhythm too.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit more? Because I'm not a native Chinese speaker. Can you describe like how you experience those rhythms as an actor or how you would characterize them? Is that possible?
I think it's interesting because we actually talked about this in Salesman Zhi, right? The first reading with Arthur Miller, the play took 4 hours to finish because that's the Chinese actor's sense of rhythm when it comes to dwell on the emptiness, the empty space, to give it a long pause, and then to make sure to allow the emotions to go fully before the next emotional transition come. And that is too much breath. It's too many breathing process for Arthur Miller, an American audience, right? And I found that quite, I got that feedback quite often when I first arrived in America. Just like, it's great, but 10 times faster. Right. And when I come back to Taiwan, they will give me the feedback. It's like, oh, you are very fast. I think you should take it down a notch so we can fully understand what you're saying before we take another breath. So I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Just to add on, it's very funny when we say that, because the other day, Jeremy, when we were chatting, Jeremy shared something like he in the States, the jokes, the punchlines, it's always direct, short. Unlike in Mandarin, it's somehow mysteriously twisting and in its own way. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, humor functions very differently in different cultures. And when I read something in a play that I know is meant to be funny, but I also know if I translate it as is into English, it won't be funny. And so I have to find a way to shift it so that it has the same effect. Like it's no longer about language, right? It's about translating a sense of humor as well, which is one of the hardest things to do. But like, if it makes the audience laugh in Chinese, it should make the audience laugh in English. Of course, not everything is transferable. And I think not everything has to be legible. And sometimes I think, you know what, if we present this play and at this point, only the Chinese people in the audience laugh, that's fine.
所以我们其实刚刚一直在讨论说，就是其实在中文，其实不只是语义翻译的问题，也有一些节奏上面的，就是这说中文的节奏跟说英文的节奏到底差在哪里呢？然后这个东西当中要怎么做转化？然后刚刚Wei-Yi也稍微分享了一下。那我提出来的问题是说，因为 Jeremy 之前有聊到说，其实在美式的语言跟幽默感里面，那个笑点总是比较直接，然后其实是比较短的。那在中文呢，里面比较会去玩一些稍微没有那么直接的意境，然后来传达笑话。那到底幽默感要怎么翻译呢？这是非常吊诡的一件事情。但对 Jeremy 来说呢，重点是有没有效果，而不是因为很多如果是照翻的话就不好笑了。那这个东西到底要怎么去取决，其实是一个很难的课题啊。我们其实大家也都还在学习的当中。Okay, we have quite a few more questions, so please allow me to continue. Okay, here's a question. There are many emotional or deep meaning of Chinese or vice versa in English. How to well and correctly express this meaning through the acting to the audience who doesn't know the original language?
I mean, honestly, I don't think that's anyone's job. It's, when I present the text to the actors and director, they should receive it as an English text. It's no one's job to try and derive the original Chinese meaning and try to convey that as well. Like you're starting anew. This is where we're coming from. And again, you gain some things, you lose some things. You're not trying to convey every last nuance of the original, because if you did, it would be deadly. It would be like a text that's just footnoted and so full of trying so hard that you lose the life of it. It becomes a museum piece.
是的，其实同样就是骚老之前讲的，在翻译的过程当中，本来是有得也有失，所以如果试着要传递每一个该原本的语言里面的每一个所有的细节，其实就会变得太复杂太多，反而会失去它的效果。那其实通常演员拿到本的时候，其实就是翻译家已经翻好了，其实就是从那个翻好的本开始出发，比较少还会说再回去看说，可是那个中文本身是这个样子啊，那我们要再怎么样再去钻研这个中文本身的深处的意义是怎样呢？会比较不会走这个路线了。这样。
But I also think that language is cultural, right? Speech is cultural, but emotions are universal. As long as we understand what's the original meaning behind those words, we shall understand the emotions that should come with it, because the ultimate goal is to communicate, right? So the effective communication is to express my emotions freely. So I don't think that will be blocked or diminished by language, as long as the actor himself can understand it. Yeah.
I agree. It reminds me of a very common theater games that we used to play in college. It's called gibberish, right? So even if you are talking about nonsense, but people are supposed to understand what you mean somehow. And that's the power of this emotion behind the language itself. Even if you don't speak the language, a performer ideally is supposed to deliver the same effect to the audience. The next question is, what are the...
I don't know if you can see the chat, but I think we need to wrap up actually.
Yeah, we're over time.
Oh.
Oops.
Are we over time? Oh, okay, the last question.
Oops.
What are the Oh no, that's already asked. Sorry about that. Okay, there's a question. How has your connection engaged your art and your life?
What does that mean?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure about that. So, I mean, if you ask these questions, maybe you can rephrase it. But while you rephrase it, we're just going to jump to another question. So someone asked, when you do the translation, if there are, how do you say 音韵? Like there's some 音韵problem.
Rhyme?
Like, yeah, rhyme as well. And also the tone in the language. Is it possible to translate that?
I mean, you can translate iambic from Shakespeare into Chinese, so.
Honestly, you try your best. I mean, the opera example that Michael brought up earlier was essentially something we came up with in the rehearsal room. And it was me and the playwright and Michael and the actors just putting our heads together going, okay, this is what we want to convey here. It's the original. What would make sense in English? And that's the solution we came up with. But it's a bit like a crossword puzzle. You're sort of trying to find clever ways around certain things and just trying to bring them across the best you can.
Got it. Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing the insights. Unfortunately, we're not able to get back to the earlier question. We're sorry about that because time is up. But we thank you all so much for participating in this forum. If you have further questions, please feel free to send in and we'll be more than happy to reply. And also please follow up on ACC's social media. And also we will attach all the links and informations later on. So if you're interested in any of the productions that we just talked about, feel free to dig into it. And I would like to thank you, my lovely, wonderful artist panelist with us today, Michael, Jeremy, and Wei-Yi. Thank you all so much. So before we finish this forum, please allow me to give back the microphone to Cecily again. I believe she will share with all of you about the coming event. If you enjoy this forum, please join us. ACC has been hosting so many interesting dialogues between cultures. Cecily, please.
Thank you so much, Pao. Thank you so much, Michael and Jeremy and Wei-Yi. This, like the best of parties, you know, you want to leave wanting more. So I know we could go on talking about this for a very long time. And I loved what Wei-Yi, what you were saying is that the ultimate goal is just communication, right? It's connection. It's a connection across difference. It's a connection across borders, across language, across culture, which is what ACC exists to try to do. Thank you. And for those of you who are interested in continuing the conversation around international cultural exchange and theater, we urge you to join us for our next inDialogue event, which will be on December 8th with theater maker Elise Thoron, poet lawyer Dwayne Betts, and Japanese paper artist Kyoko Ibe. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you and working with you in the future. Good night, everybody.
Yay, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.